We're jumping right in because what we witnessed was a moment of full-blown institutional crisis.
Right.
Something happened on live television that was never, ever meant to be seen. You have a cable news host, a completely routine segment, a familiar face,
Yeah.
Ilhan Omar, and then, boom,
Nothing.
the entire system just short circuits.
Yeah.
In real time, for everyone to see.
And we have to be so clear about this. That system failure, it wasn't some technical glitch. It wasn't an accident.
No.
It was a conscious choice. It was a panicked choice. We all watched a live feed get cut, just silent, abrupt, right in the middle of a sentence.
And it wasn't because the guest misspoke or said a curse word.
No, not at all. It's because the host, and probably more importantly, the producers in the control room, they realized in that split second that the conversation couldn't be steered back.
It was off the rails.
It was off the approved rails. And the sheer speed of that decision, that tells you everything. It tells you about the fear that is gripping corporate media right now.
It was a visible act of control, right there.
Yeah.
An override of the entire editorial process. This wasn't about running out of time. It wasn't about a breaking news story somewhere else.
Wow.
This was containment.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. This was a risk management decision made so fast, so unbelievably fast, there was no buffer, no graphic, no cut to a commercial.
Just blackness.
Just a sudden black void. The control room knew. They knew they had already lost the ability to frame the discourse, and they decided silence was the only defense they had left.
The silence itself became the story. That's the irony.
Exactly.
In that moment, it exposed the media's most vulnerable point. It exposed the raw panic that hits them when a live, unfiltered discussion threatens the ideological architecture they've spent years building.
Right.
That abrupt shutdown signaled something huge. It signaled that the corporate media's meticulously managed extremism narrative, their entire framework for who they label and why, had just cracked wide open in public.
It's the ultimate collision, isn't it? You have these, structural failures of legacy media running headlong into the real world fallout of policy.
Yes, tangible consequences.
Specifically, let's just say it. Mass migration and the compounded economic stress we're all feeling in late 2025. This wasn't just about one clip. This was about trust just collapsing, a country no longer buying the script.
And that's our mission today. We're going to perform an autopsy on that exact moment. We are dissecting the failure of the media establishment to control language and reality at the same time.
And why that sign-off was so much more than an isolated incident.
It was a massive institutional admission, a confession, really.
We are exposing the full truth of why that live feed was cut. This is about institutional panic and a media system that is realizing in real time it no longer controls the narrative or your trust. Stay with us as we expose the full truth. If you want the news they don't want you to hear, hit that subscribe button right now. Okay, let's really unpack this moment. I think it's critical we reconstruct the scene, especially for anyone who didn't see the viral clip.
Absolutely. The context is everything.
The segment started out so safe. It was scripted, predictable. The host was leading this discussion that was, clearly meant to reiterate established talking points.
Right. The goal was clearly to talk about domestic extremism, but only within a very narrow, very politically convenient box.
And then the guest, Ilhan Omar, she responded. And that's when it all changed.
It changed instantly. And the source material we've gone through, it really points out that the initial trigger wasn't something obvious. It wasn't a curse word. It wasn't some unhinged statement.
Oh.
It was a subtle but profound shift. A shift in her performance and, more importantly, in the subject matter itself.
So the discussion was supposed to be about defining radicalism.
Yes, their definition of it. But Omar pivoted. She didn't just disagree with the premise of the question, she actually inverted it. She used the media's own language, their own framing, right back against them.
She introduced a variable they hadn't planned for. From what we understand, she connected the conversation about American domestic extremism, usual target, to the institutional responses to foreign policy. Specifically, the conflict in the Middle East.
That was the precise trigger. This segment was designed to discuss, quote, politicized threats inside the U.S. That's the safe zone for them.
Right.
Omar, instead of sticking to that script, instead of defining threats outside the system, she started talking about the costs, the financial, ideological, and the moral trade-offs that are required by the system itself to maintain its current posture.
Both foreign and domestic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She started blurring the lines between foreign policy criticism and domestic policy critique. And that right there, that is the exact fault line where the approved narrative completely breaks down.
And the most important behavioral cue from what the analysis shows Wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it.
Yes, the nonverbals were critical.
The source material highlights these little details. A pause, a slight smile. These things did not match the expected tone, the gravity or the outrage that cable news demands for these subjects.
She sounded confident, she sounded calm, analytical even.
Which is the last thing they wanted.
That calm, analytical approach, while discussing a subject that's usually reserved for, high emotion outrage, it created this dissonant effect. You can literally see the host just freeze, a micro freeze.
Each of them just broke.
It shattered because the conversation stopped being about fighting a designated enemy, which they know how to do.
Yeah.
That's easy. You can spin that into a ratings-boosting moral lecture all day.
But it became dangerous to the framing itself.
That's it. The moment the ideological integrity of their story was threatened, the panic began.
Wait, hold on. I have to interrupt you there because this needs absolute clarity for our listeners who might not get the mechanics of live television. Live TV has systems. It has controls. It is designed from the ground up to prevent this exact type of public failure. You have producers in your ear, you have 5-second delays, visual cues, graphics packages ready to go. You have ads ready to roll at a moment's notice.
A whole arsenal of tools.
So why was there no transition?
Yeah.
Why the immediate silent darkness?
That is the million-dollar question, and the answer is just pure, unadulterated institutional panic. Completely overriding protocol.
So it wasn't protocol.
It was the opposite of protocol, a standard cut, which a network uses all the time to handle a guest who's going off script. It involves a producer's cue, a slight delay, a verbal interruption from the host, and then usually a pre-planned visual transition.
Like a graphic or an ad break.
Exactly. A graphic, an ad break, even a technical difficulty slate. That whole sequence is designed to convey competence even when the content is chaotic.
But that's not what happened here.
Not even close. What we saw was the broadcast equivalent of a dead stop. A producer, or more likely an executive, someone with the authority to kill the feed at the source, just slammed the emergency button.
Wow.
An abrupt cut like that, the immediate silence, the black screen, that is the clearest possible admission of failure. It signals that their risk calculus changed so fast that they decided the content currently being broadcast was more dangerous to the network's long-term authority than the immediate embarrassment of a public, jarring shutdown.
So in that split second, someone upstairs decided that letting Omar finish her thought, or even letting the host try to rebut it.
Which would have given her point legitimacy.
Right. That was a greater danger than the visual proof of censorship. The immediate silence was an act of pure self-preservation.
Precisely. If they had engaged, if they had debated her, they would have legitimized her critique. They would have legitimized the idea that the established moral framework has concrete, real-world financial and ideological trade-offs that the networks absolutely refuse to discuss.
So by cutting the feed,
they achieved temporary control, but they permanently legitimized the audience's worst suspicion. That what she was saying was too honest, too close to the truth to even be heard. It wasn't journalism, it was institutional damage control.
and what's so fascinating is the implication for the control room itself. If they had had time to even show a technical difficulty graphic, they would have.
Oh, 100%.
That would have given them plausible deniability. The fact that they didn't suggest the panic was so instantaneous that it bypassed their own standard operating procedures.
The ones designed for exactly this scenario.
They lost the ability to even lie smoothly about why the broadcast ended.
That's the core insight here. You have to focus on that. The faster the cut, the clearer the panic. It means they couldn't find a pivot. They couldn't find a safe rhetorical landing spot. And so they resorted to the fastest, crudest defense available.
Sell the power.
Kill the power. And this swift, graceless move, it confirms that the network is managing perception and protecting its own institutional position. It's not reporting reality. And the audience, they register that, even if it's just subconsciously. They might not know the technical protocols, but they know what a smooth broadcast looks like. And this was anything but.
Which brings us to the question of why. Why that specific comment at that specific time created such acute panic.
Yeah.
And it links directly to the one word the media has relied on for years.
Extremism.
The label of extremism.
Yeah.
If that institutional panic was triggered by a collapse in trust, we have to talk about what they were trusting in the first place.
Right.
And that leads us right to the definition game, the game they play with words, specifically extremism.
Oh, it's the definition game. And they have been masters of it for the better part of a decade. They've rebranded language. Words like extremism, hate, misinformation. they've made them totally elastic.
They stretch the definition when they need to police certain political views, and then they shrink it right back when they need to protect their allies or their own institutional ideology.
It's purely strategic. For years, the term extremism was defined so narrowly on cable news. It was framed to point safely in one very specific, very predictable political direction.
They were their shield.
It was their armor and their weapon. But Omar's comments, by forcing that connection between domestic ideological debates and foreign policy costs, it threatened to blur that line completely.
The crack appeared because her language didn't fit.
Yeah.
It didn't land cleanly in their pre-approved bucket of, radical fringe commentary.
Exactly.
Instead, she forced viewers to look at established policy the networks themselves support, and ask if that was potentially extreme in its consequences. The emotional cues just didn't match the moral lecture the audience has been conditioned to expect.
And suddenly, viewers are left asking questions the media desperately, desperately wants to suppress.
Questions like,
Well, what is extremism when you define it by its financial cost, its social cost, its moral cost, rather than just by political affiliation?
who gets to decide?
Who gets to decide? And why is the label only ever applied asymmetrically? Why does it always point one way and never allow for any self-critique?
The moment the audience senses that inconsistency.
The spell breaks. That's it. Extremism stops being a moral label, a designation of some true, profound danger, and it starts looking exactly like what it is, a political tool used for strategic social policing.
It becomes transparent. It stops being a shared moral understanding of dangerous behavior, and it starts looking like a highly sophisticated way to silence people who ask uncomfortable, system-challenging questions.
Right. The audience sees the strings and the whole puppet show just falls apart.
It really is like a rigged card game.
That's a great way to put it. For years, the House, the corporate media, they've set the rules, they've dealt the cards, and they've decided what's a winning hand and what's a losing hand. When they defined extremism, they were just stacking the deck.
And
Omar stands up at the table and points out that the dealer is changing the rules mid-hand, depending on who's playing. She didn't even call the dealer a cheater. She just highlighted the inconsistency in the deck itself.
And what's so crucial is that viewers are sophisticated enough now to notice that, to notice the change in the rules, even if they can't, articulate the political theory behind it.
They get it. They realize the definitions are flexible depending on who is speaking and what the political moment demands.
And that realization is the collapse of trust we're talking about.
It's the whole thing. Corporate media can easily survive disagreement. They thrive on it. Controversy drives clicks and ratings. What they cannot survive is the audience realizing in real time that the structural rules, the definitions, the moral framing, the boundaries of acceptable debate, that they change mid-sentence.
The moment people see that, trust doesn't just erode.
It collapses instantly.
Which means they're trapped. Because if you can constantly redefine the threat, if your language becomes your political armor, you never actually have to confront the real failures or contradictions of the system you're defending.
You just change the label on the criticism.
But that only works for so long. It only works until the label stops sticking.
And the label stops sticking when it collides with reality. If the media keeps insisting that, say, a specific financial critique of municipal spending on migrant services is extremist rhetoric, while people are watching their school taxes double,
the word extremist loses all its power.
it just becomes noise. The audience internalizes that the media is lying. Not necessarily about the facts, but about the implications of the facts.
So the goal isn't just to silence the person who said the thing, though that's a nice bonus for them.
Right.
The real goal is to preserve the structural integrity of the label itself. They need extremism to stay this terrifying, unambiguous moral threat so they can keep deploying it effectively against anyone who challenges the orthodoxy.
Omar was threatening to neuter their weapon.
And that's why the silence was so deafening.
It was an attempt to disinfect the airwaves after contamination. They were trying to tell the audience, through an act of sheer force, that what she was saying was outside the bounds of civilized discourse. They were trying to restore the moral weight of the extremism label.
But the very abruptness of it betrayed their weakness.
Completely. It showed the audience that the label is so fragile, it can't withstand even a calm, analytical challenge on live TV.
And that fragility brings us right to the ultimate pressure point they are dodging. It's no longer about abstract ideology. It's about the collision of that ideology with your wallet, your safety, and your sanity in late 2025.
We have absolutely moved past abstract moral debates. What we're talking about now, the source of the media's deepest panic, is the reality that the policies they defended on ideological grounds have produced concrete, quantifiable, painful consequences on the ground.
Right. It's arithmetic. It's not ideology anymore. That's what has fractured the narrative. The media narrative insists on framing mass migration, for example, only as a moral debate. It's about compassion, and that allows them to dismiss any critic as radical or extremist.
It's their go-to move.
But the reality for millions of Americans is a logistical and financial crisis. It's affecting every local budget, every school district, every 9/11 response time.
Okay, let's break down that arithmetic. The math that the media refuses to cover because it, quote, doesn't fit neatly into the approved extremism framework. We need to get granular here.
Let's do it.
We are talking about specific, measurable impacts that affect the average person's daily life.
So start with the housing market. That's where the pressure became visible first.
Absolutely. Housing costs, particularly for rental properties in the low to mid-range, they remain elevated. Or in some places, they're climbing again in specific pressure points.
And this isn't just a New York City problem anymore.
Not at all. It's not just the major coastal hubs where the sheer volume created that immediate spectacular crisis. This is now hitting smaller cities, suburban counties, areas with less infrastructure and much thinner budgets.
Right.
Where new demand for shelter, even temporary shelter, just compounds the existing scarcity. It exacerbates the inflationary pressure on rent. And those are costs that are borne directly by the working class.
And the media keeps telling those same working class communities that they're being cruel or inhumane for noticing their rent is going up, for noticing the vacancy rate is 0.
You're being lectured by talking heads who own multiple homes in gated communities.
That's the core betrayal.
It is. And then look at the strain on municipal and county budgets. The source material details how local governments are quietly performing these massive, unprecedented reallocations of taxpayer funds.
Quietly is the key word.
Very quietly. Take New York City. We are talking about billions of dollars being shifted from essential city services, sanitation, parks, libraries, infrastructure projects, directly into managing the logistics of migrant support, housing, and emergency medical care.
So if you're a listener in Queens or Staten Island, you're seeing your tax dollars diverted to house recent arrivals, while your kid's school is now overcrowded, your local library is cutting its hours, and the potholes on your street aren't getting fixed.
You're paying twice.
You're paying twice. Once in inflated prices because of scarcity, and again through degraded municipal services. It's unbelievable.
And this strain isn't just limited to the big cities that initially embraced the rhetoric. You look at communities all along the southern border or unexpected transit hubs like Chicago and Denver. Local officials, Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. They are all struggling to manage the sheer volume. When the mayor of a major American city is forced to publicly admit that his city is on the brink of financial collapse because of these unreimbursed costs, the media's attempt to frame the conversation on abstract compassion, it just fails immediately.
The viewer sees the balance sheet, they don't see the sermon.
Precisely.
And the most immediate, the most tangible, and frankly, terrifying impact for the average person is the deterioration of emergency services. We're talking about 9/11.
This is where ideology becomes a life or death calculation. When a city's resources are stretched thin and essential services like fire, ambulance, and police are competing for finite funding and finite personnel, response times inevitably increase.
It's simple math.
It's simple math. If you dial 911 for an emergency and they don't show up, or the wait is unacceptable, you cannot dismiss the person complaining about that as an extremist. They're talking about the basic social contract failing right before their eyes.
So the media tells you, do not notice the structural cost.
Yeah.
Do not notice the trade-off. Just focus on the moral imperative. But you, the viewer, you are experiencing the consequences directly. You can't afford your rent, your school district is overwhelmed, and your 911 call is going unanswered.
Exactly. And the viewer isn't rejecting compassion in principle. They're rejecting the denial. They're rejecting being lectured by national news networks that never, ever address the painful, localized trade-offs that their communities are being forced to shoulder.
The media is asking, are you a good person or are you an extremist?
But the working class community member is asking, why is my rent still 30% too high? And why is the local school district now bankrupting itself, trying to accommodate an unexpected surge? They're two different conversations.
And when the media uses silence, the silent cut, the refusal to cover specific budget shortfalls, it just confirms what viewers already feel. It confirms that reality violently conflicts with the approved talking points.
And trust doesn't just erode.
It evaporates completely. No amount of moral framing can override lived, painful experience.
That is the dynamic the abrupt cut revealed. The moment that ideological framing collided with the basic math of city budgets and consumer prices, the narrative just stops working. The person watching TV sees a guest, Omar, finally hinting at the mathematical impossibility of the current situation.
And they see the network panic and pull the plug.
And that act of censorship validates the viewer's skepticism more powerfully than any counter-narrative ever could.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little bit. On your analysis of the media's strategy,
Please do.
couldn't the networks argue, and this is the cynical corporate lawyer perspective, that they cut the feed purely for legal or compliance reasons, not for narrative control? Where is the definitive proof of institutional panic versus just, cautious lawyering?
That's a necessary challenge, and it goes to the heart of their potential defense.
Right.
If it were a purely legal or compliance cut, let's say a threat of libel or revealing classified information, the procedure is still designed to be smooth. A producer would have immediately cut the mic, and the host will be fed a line.
Like, we have to go to break.
We have to go to break, or we must move on for legal reasons. The appearance of control is paramount in those scenarios because the network must maintain the perception of being a reliable, professional, legal entity.
But the cut was jarring. It was silent and instantaneous.
It was reckless. It was the antithesis of cautious lawyering. Cautious lawyering prioritizes procedure and documentation. This was the response driven by fear of rhetorical damage, not legal damage.
So the idea was more dangerous than the liability.
The rhetorical damage, the threat that the audience would suddenly understand the logical contradiction in the network's framing that was deemed so immediate and so toxic that someone prioritized visible silence over maintaining the professional illusion of competency. The sloppiness is the proof of the panic. They sacrificed their reputation for professionalism to save their ideological position.
That is a chilling distinction. They were more afraid of the idea getting out than they were of looking like amateur censors. So let's put this moment in the broader political context of late 2025.
Right.
Because this doesn't happen in a vacuum.
This is a massive shift in the gravitational field of American politics and media authority. The source material points out that the return of Donald Trump completely alters the media setting. It explains why the legacy media establishment is so structurally unstable right now.
They spent 4 years, maybe more, building their entire brand around being the resistance. Their whole structural position was that of the challenger, the truth teller standing up to institutional corruption. Every misstep, every economic hiccup, every social tension could be blamed externally on the other guy.
That playbook is now useless. It's obsolete. And that's why the panic sets in so much faster. Legacy networks, your MSNBCs and CNNs, they're no longer seen as the scrappy resistance. They're now interwoven with the power structures they once claimed to be fighting.
Right.
So when their narratives fail under the new administration, when the economy still strains, when social issues persist, when inflation still bites, there's no rally cry. There's no emergency framing they can use to reset the audience and divert attention.
Because the audience sees them as part of the establishment now. They can't just point the finger at a common enemy because the audience sees the corporate media itself as a pillar of the system that's failing them.
Their narrative authority is shot.
It's gone.
And that vulnerability creates this perverse incentive structure. When they were in opposition, they could afford robust debate because the outcome usually reinforced their anti-establishment position.
It helped them.
It helped them. Now that they're defending the establishment, robustness is risky. Any challenge, especially one that exposes the financial cost of their ideology, is treated as an existential threat.
Which leads to their most insulting assumption.
Yeah.
They think people are misinformed. They think we're stupid.
I do.
They truly believe that if they just frame the issues a little better or use louder graphics or hire a more aggressive channel, that the audience will just come back to the approved narrative.
And that is the huge, costly mistake corporate media keeps making. The Omar cut proves it. Viewers are not confused. They are disconnected. They are rational actors seeing trade-offs and failures that the media refuses to acknowledge. They got the point during that segment. They saw the hesitation, they noticed the tonal shift, and they understood exactly why the show ended early without anyone having to explain it to them.
They don't need the network to tell them what to think.
They know they're being told not to think about specific contradictions.
So if the audience is that smart, what is the institutional tell that most people might miss? How do we know the difference between a network just making an editorial choice and a network in a full-blown panic.
It's the difference between argument and evasion. It's that simple. When institutions are confident, when they genuinely believe in their narrative and the soundness of their definitions, they debate, they argue, they rebut vigorously.
They welcome the fight.
They welcome it because they believe their structural position is solid and they can win the argument on its merits.
They believe the platform still has authority.
Exactly. But when they are not confident, when they realize the ideological ground is shifting beneath them, they go quiet. Abrupt sign-offs, sudden topic changes, awkward silences, canceling segments at the last minute.
These aren't just production errors.
No, they are institutional admissions. They are signals that the structural footing is unstable, and the people in charge already know they have lost the argument. Their only remaining tool is control of the platform itself.
That's why silence on air is so damaging to them right now. It confirms the audience's worst suspicion, that honesty is not allowed past a certain inconvenient point.
It's confirmation bias for the skeptical viewer, and it's being driven by the very networks trying to reassure them.
And this dynamic, this leads to the cycle of disengagement you mentioned, which is really the final nail in the coffin for their authority.
It is. Viewers don't engage in heated debate anymore when they see this. They don't argue online. They just quietly leave. They just bounce.
They find another source.
Or they just disengage from the political conversation altogether. And once viewers disengage emotionally, the power of mass influence, the ability to set the national agenda, it just disappears with them.
And once that trust breaks, it's not coming back with better graphics or louder panels?
No. It requires a fundamental honesty that the abrupt cut proved is strictly off the table. They are optimizing for control when they should be optimizing for credibility, and those two goals are now completely incompatible.
The irony is just. It's incredible. In their desperate attempt to maintain narrative discipline, they're accelerating their own demise.
Every act of visible censorship, every jarring cut, every asymmetric application of the extremism label just chips away at their institutional foundation.
They're burning down their own house to kill one conversation.
That's a perfect way to say it.
So Ilhan Omar wasn't the cause. She was just the trigger. The conversation she sparked was the litmus test that exposed the panic already there.
And the fear is justified. Because the audience is ahead of the script now. The audience has already done the arithmetic on their own local budgets. They already know the score.
And this is where it gets chilling.
Absolutely. If you look at history, this pattern of institutional behavior is consistent. Every time institutional power starts slipping, the resort to visible control mechanisms, the silence, it actually comes before the reckoning.
It's a leading indicator.
It's the desperate maneuver of an authority figure who no longer trusts their own structural position to win an argument fairly.
So the abrupt cut during the Omar segment, it just confirmed what audiences already suspected.
That some conversations cannot be had live. The ones dealing with the financial trade-offs of ideology, the ones exposing the contradictions in their extremism framework. Those conversations can't happen because the answers don't serve the established narrative.
And silence is now considered safer than honesty?
They would rather look like censors for a day than lose the argument forever. But that trade-off has a terminal cost. The loss of the platform's power, which vanishes when the audience stops caring about what the establishment says.
That's the reality we're facing. A media system realizing it no longer controls the narrative, the language, or your trust. When the definitions stop working, when the moral framing fails, when your lived reality overrides their talking points, control slips.
And the question for all of us now is, when authority starts relying on silence, what is the next stage of control? Does the silence just get deeper?
That's the heavy thought to leave you with. But I want to know what you think. When you see a news segment cut abruptly, do you think it's a technical error, or do you immediately assume there's a managed agenda behind it? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. We read every single one. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sophia. Thanks for listening to News Focus.